Tracy Swedlow, and this is Televisionation. I am really happy to have David Goodfriend. So welcome to the show, David.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks for having me. And I love your background. It makes me feel right at home.
I think we just finished our Jarosos, even though we're in May. I think we just finished it. Okay.
All right, make it last.
And you're in your middle of your Hawaiian trip there. Is that what that is?
Yeah, this is a photo I actually took when my wife and I went to Hawaii in February. We're sitting on the balcony, watching the sunset, having a beautiful dinner, and it feels like a million miles away and a million years ago, given what's going on right now. So I'm clinging to that memory by placing myself virtually there. I hope you can join me in this vibe. It's a good vibe.
Well, I'm definitely feeling it. I think I have a few sunsets. I throw up here sometimes when I need a little relaxation.
Yeah.
Actually, they have TV systems out, right, that have just art on them. And you can just watch art. You can watch sunsets. You can watch, black and white shots of animals. I mean, who needs content? No, I'm kidding. We love all of it.
It's better than watching real-time weather radar, which can be really boring, but people watch that too. I'd much rather watch a sunset or animals, as you say, or art.
One of my criteria for picking a husband was that I could get one who would be interested in watching documentaries and, that would be willing to sit down and watch a documentary with me. And I got one, so that's good. Anyway, maybe that's a boring criteria, but
that's a good one.
I got a good one.
Documentary's about, Tracy. I won't ask, but I'm sure that they're good.
It's of all. We don't have to go there, but all things. All right. Anyway, so of course you are the founder, CEO of Locast, LOCAST.org.
Yep.
And we've had you at the show a couple of times now, TVOT shows. I believe at the last show you were in 12 markets. That was in June. Now you're in 18 markets. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're in 18 markets. Our most recent one was Puerto Rico, and it enabled me to do an interview in Spanish with some media folks from Puerto Rico. But I had to have my sister-in-law, who's Puerto Rican, on with me to make sure I didn't make any really bad mistakes because my Spanish is only okay. Oh yeah, there we go.
Work?
Yeah, but you cut off the Puerto Rico down. If you keep going down, we've got.
Oh. There it is.
There it is. There it is. Yeah, so we're in 18 markets now, and we covered just shy of 40% of the nation's television households. And as you can see from this map, we've really tried to diversify geographically and by size of market. While we do serve all 10 of the top 10 media markets, we also carry some smaller markets like Sioux Falls and Sioux City, Rapid City, and Puerto Rico. Those are not major markets, but there are a lot of people who live there and need the service badly because one thing I learned from my friends in South Dakota is that where they live, you're actually more likely to get broadband than you are to get an over-the-air broadcast signal. So that's the perfect place for Locast to step in and say, well, if you do have a broadband connection or you're able to use your wireless smartphone, here, you can watch your local broadcast news, weather, emergency information, and entertainment. And it's worked out really well there.
I was going to say, because, that's definitely, those are hard markets, right? And it's interesting that they embraced this opportunity.
Yeah, they reached out to us. There were people from those markets who reached out to us and said, we'd really love to see you launch here. And I told them, I said, the economics are not, this is a perennial problem in rural America. The economics are tougher. So would you be willing to help me? And they set up a nonprofit and they took contributions from around the community and helped us defray the capital expenditures for getting a place to put up an antenna. And it's worked out really well.
Wow. Is it only in those cities, or does that happen in any other market?
It happened in the smaller markets, Puerto Rico, Rapid City, Sioux City, Sioux Falls. And they offer stands. I mean, in rural America, if you're in a small market, we can get there, we can serve you, but we just need some help from your community. In the larger markets, we're able to sign up a lot of people and a lot of donors, individual donors, quickly, and that pretty much helps pay for itself.
So
Really,
they promote it. They promote it out there.
they have
Promote the
to some
service.
extent. Yes, they have promoted it, and others promote it as well. In fact, there are some companies and organizations that we are not even, in touch with, that have promoted Locast as an answer for cord cutters or cord nevers. And I have to say, Tracy, the kind of 800-pound gorilla here is the crisis that we're all going through right now. We're
That's
all
why I contacted you, because I thought, well, we should find out how you are able to operate and grow in this market when people need more communication. So who interrupted you?
it's been very humbling and gratifying and sad all at once, because we've had comments from people who write to us and say, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be able to know what's going on in my local market. I can't afford cable. I can't afford streaming services that have local channels, or I simply live in a place that doesn't get an over-the-air signal. Locast is the only way I'm able to get my local news and emergency information. In fact, this predates the crisis.
But this is wait, hold on. I interrupted, but sorry, but I'm going to talk anyway, because the trends that we're seeing is that people are moving to AVOD, right, services.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to find out if those are add-ons or if people are unsubscribing from these other services, or embracing something like Locast, which is a free option unless you want to hand in some donation money. So go ahead. Pre-crisis.
Yeah, well, I was just going to show you. This is a letter that I share with people whenever I get the chance. I keep it here by my desk. It's from a guy named Jerry. It arrived in January of this year, and he writes, "Dear Locast, I very much appreciate the Locast channel. I am handicapped and mostly housebound, living alone. My home is just by the airport, making antenna service impossible. I am 80 years old and low income, having just $500 each month plus Social Security, but I wish to give you $5 a month for your service." Signed, Jerry. So I keep that right here at my desk, and just as a reminder of the really important service that Locast is providing. It's easy to get swept up in the hype of new technology and new services and trends in streaming. That's all really important stuff, but these are really hard times for a lot of people, for a lot of our friends and neighbors and fellow Americans. And that's just one of thousands of comments that we've gotten from people that say, I'm really strapped for cash and I can't afford the stuff that's out there, and I need you for my local news. Now, you asked about AVOD. Here's an interesting point. It's true that there are services, I think Pluto and others, that are ad-supported video streaming services, but that's not local. That's not local broadcast. That's not local news, really.
Mm-hmm.
In
Yes,
fact,
good point.
You have been a student of the revolution in television that's going on right now with streaming. This year, 2020, will be marked in the history books as the time when all of television changed. Think of the streaming services that have launched just this year. Disney Plus, HBO Max is coming, Peacock is coming. Lots of services are being launched. But it's also the year that we had the worst crisis in generations, where people are relying on video streaming more than ever to stay in touch. Locast is the only streaming service that offers you all local content, and we offer it for free. Now, we interrupt every 15 minutes saying, hey, we're a nonprofit, would you please make a contribution? But of the over 1.3 million people who've signed up, most of them don't contribute. The good news, though, is that there's a significant enough fraction of people who say, sure, I'll give you $5 a month, I like what you're doing, that it's paying for everything right now. It's paying for our operational expenses. It's even helping to pay down some of the debt that we took on to launch. It's paying our vendors. And we are in business because enough people are voluntarily contributing $5 a month that Locast is in great shape. That's why we're able to add so many markets that we have since the last time I spoke at one of your conferences. And we're just going to keep marching along, adding markets, adding users, and adding donors.
What's your relationship to the local broadcast news stations?
So we are basically a bent pipe. We put up an antenna in every market, receive the over-the-air signals, and retransmit them over the internet. Just within that market, it's geofenced to that DMA, that designated market area. And we don't change the commercials. We don't change anything. We just retransmit it. And of course, we're operating, as you probably know, under a copyright provision that's been on the books since 1976 that says a nonprofit may retransmit a broadcast signal, provided the nonprofit doesn't get any direct or indirect commercial benefit. And that's the part that the people who have sued us, the big four broadcast networks and their parent companies, have sued us because they say, no, you're getting some indirect benefit out of this. Well, I've been very happy to turn over all my bank records, all the bank records for my nonprofit, my company, all my emails for years, and they will not find me making a profit. They've accused me of that. They have said that other companies like my former employer and current client Dish Network are making money, or maybe AT&T is making money because they've made a contribution to Locast once. There too, they're going to find that actually, because we help people cut the cord, we arguably are hurting those companies, not helping them. So I think the theory of their case is not going to work. And all these user comments that I've been mentioning to you so far just underscore that. There is a bona fide public purpose and charitable purpose to what we're doing. It's not commercially motivated, but it is motivated by my desire and lots of people's desire to do the right thing.
Okay. There's one company in particular that comes to mind who's not suing you, I think, and they have a bunch of markets, local television markets, and I mean that would be Sinclair.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think they're not suing you?
Well, I think they said in one of their investor conferences or investor calls that they were glad that the networks were suing. So I think that they probably are with the networks in spirit on that. But I also think that there are a lot of, it's not just Sinclair that did not sue Locast. The public broadcasters did not sue Locast. Lots of independent broadcasters that are not part of a big conglomerate like Sinclair, they did not sue Locast. And in fact, one of the things that I found really pleasant is that there are multiple local broadcasters who have supported Locast, either with a financial contribution or with some advice, or by helping us to expand into other markets. So it's a little bit of a misconception to think that all broadcasters think alike and all broadcasters are opposed to Locast. I think what is going on, though, is that the broadcast industry itself, for all the reasons we just said, is going through massive transformations right now. And there's fear. There's fear in the broadcast community about how to approach the future. I would argue that what Locast is doing is giving a leg up to the local broadcaster. The local broadcaster who is told by big networks, you may not stream any of your programming day over the internet. The local broadcaster who is worried about how to monetize their programming online. Locast really is a solution to a lot of those questions. The criticism that I hear from some in the broadcast community is that Locast undermines their retransmission consent revenue. You know, there are a lot of broadcasters who charge cable operators a fee in order to have the cable operator retransmit that broadcaster's signal. The problem with that argument is that Locast is a tiny speck on that ocean you see behind me compared to the gale force wind that is cord cutting. Cord cutting is happening at an accelerating rate, and it's only been exacerbated by the current crisis. That cord cutting really does represent a decrease in a revenue stream to broadcasters, because the fewer cable subscribers there are, the less retransmission consent fees there are. Again, I would argue Locast gives the local broadcaster a leg up by saying, here, we'll just put you online. Now you are online. You're another streaming alternative for people who don't want to pay for cable. And in fact, if you want, those eyeballs online can be measured, and you can sell ads. You can show advertisers that your programming is being watched online. And I think that's really helpful to broadcasters as they look to the future. We want to work with broadcasters. I want to make that clear. I don't consider myself an enemy of broadcasting. I consider myself a friend, a good friend of local broadcasters who want their programming to be as widely viewed as possible in their markets. That's precisely our mission, to make that local broadcasting really available to as many people as possible in a local market.
My daughter is over here, who you can't see, was trying to interrupt to give me a piece of matzah, but oh well. All right.
Wait, well, bring her onto the screen. We want to see her. Oh, there it is.
Hannah, I'm talking to David. Okay.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you for the matzah. I wish I could have some.
No, she doesn't want to come on. Okay. Anyway, I'm kind of curious why, or has the government contacted you, or do they feel like they need to stay out of that? Because you guys could be potentially a national service, in times of emergency.
Yeah.
And then also, like on the flip side of that coin is, are you part of the discussion with the ATSC people? Is that?
Well, let me take the second question. No, I'm not part of the discussion of ATSC 3.0. I know that there's a lot of promise for it as essentially an over-the-air solution to what we've talked about here. I myself am a little skeptical about that, just given my experience at the FCC with the promises that were made around digital broadcasting. Mm-hmm. I was there as the industry was getting ready in the early 2000s for the digital transition, and many of the promises about data casting and multicasting and all that kind of stuff, some of it came to fruition. For example, multicast channels, we carry those on Locast. We don't just carry the primary programs, you can carry all the multicast streams, or as many as we can, and that's not something cable typically does, or satellite, or even YouTube TV or Sling. Right. But some of those promises that were made by the broadcast industry about the digital transition really have not come to fruition. And so I'm just a little bit skeptical about some of the promises that are being made around ATSC 3.0, but I'm hopeful that it helps the industry. The other question you asked me about government agencies, starting over 2 years ago when we launched in January of 2018, I went and briefed members of Congress, people in the administration. I went to the Department of Justice, the White House, the House of Representatives, the Senate. They're fully aware of what we're doing and actually quite supportive. Now, they, I think correctly, don't want to step in the middle of something that's now in the courts. I think they correctly have decided, well, let's let the courts hear the evidence and make a decision. And I'm confident that the courts will see things our way because we've taken such a straightforward interpretation of the law and because of all the facts that we now know to be true. But I do think that there is a public purpose to be served here. And here's the interesting thing. We're hearing about proposals for billions, trillions of dollars of public money. We've basically constructed a television lifeline for zero taxpayer dollars. Just think about that for a second. We have done what public policy has said is necessary, making information accessible for zero taxpayer dollars. And if you want to count up the number of dollars we've spent, they're actually ridiculously low compared to what commercial enterprises would pay for a similar operation. I mean, we have stood up this entire service covering almost 40% of the country with an enviable user interface and technological performance. We did it all for much less than $2 million. You know, most big companies would spend more than that on a consultant to come in and tell them what they think they ought to maybe should do. We just did it for very little money. And we did it because we are a nonprofit. We didn't have a lot of resources, and we had to be smart and efficient about how we did this. So I think there is a major public policy uh, uh, service, a public policy end result being produced here by this nonprofit. And it's the result of a very smart law, a law that says, well, the usual practice of charging fees for content will not apply if this is just a nonprofit that's trying to stretch the signal out there. That was the intent of the law, we believe, from 1976. That was smart. It didn't say, here's $1 billion, go build a repeater network. It just said, if you're a nonprofit without a commercial purpose and you're just expanding the reach of local broadcast signals, you can do it without getting a copyright license. And what that did was it enabled us to, as I said, produce results for the American public without a single dime of taxpayer money and with hardly any expenditures at all relative to commercial services. I think it's an example of a law that was ahead of its time, but that was based on a very, very intelligent way of constructing copyright policy so that we get a good result.
It's probably based on sort of earlier assumptions of, that the people have access to their information and access to their politicians and that they're in control. But the whole nature of our relationship to the government has been changing.
It's really true. And it's something that I said this in another conference. I won't even say the name because I want TV of Tomorrow to be the conference everybody talks about. But not long ago, I said, in my opinion, we've let commercialism and the profit motive get out of hand. Not everything has to be done as a for-profit entity in order to work. I mean, take, for example, my favorite football team in the whole wide world, the Green Bay Packers. They are the only fan-owned nonprofit organization in all of professional sports. They hail from the smallest market in all of the NFL, and yet they have one of the winningest records in NFL history. And one of the reasons is instead of having some prick billionaire at the top making decisions that he has no business making because this is some sort of vanity project for him, you've got fans that own a nonprofit, and all of the revenues get plowed back into football operations and the like. So I actually think there are salient arguments to be made for not having for-profit entities only in any segment of the economy. Just think, for example, about credit unions in banking, or about nonprofit educational institutions as opposed to for-profit educational institutions. Or for that matter, think about fire departments. There was a time in this country when fire departments were for-profit entities. And if your house was on fire, but you didn't have that company's insignia inside your house, the firemen would just sit there and watch your house burn down. So we figured out that for-profit entities really were not the best thing for fighting fires. We created municipal and volunteer fire departments, and that was much better. So I look at Locast in this broader context of the role of nonprofits in our economy right now and how important it is to have some things that are not commercial in nature or are not profit motivated in nature. It's important. And by the way, it bears results, like the Packers winning the Lombardi Trophy over and over again, or Locast getting access to more people through a nonprofit organization. I think it works.
Well, for what I understand, and I could be wrong, there isn't much of a growth opportunity unless, to be made from advertising, unless you're, because the revenue you're getting is from these donations, or are you making money from some other form of advertising? Because it sounds like you can't really, right? So the only growth opportunity you have is for being more distributed, more donations. And then I would say, maybe there's another business model that could be imposed on top of that, which is membership, where people take a feeling of, like you're saying, like the people collectively own Locast sort of with you, but have maybe they're not there as an investor, right?
Well, listen,
they're not getting okay. I was just kind of curious if that was
under federal nonprofit law. We're a 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization. We have a letter from the IRS saying you've been granted this status. But a 501c3 can have multiple revenue streams. I mean, if you go to a theater, you pay for a ticket, to go in and watch the show. The theater may be a nonprofit, but you're transacting. The program at the theater may have advertisements in it from organizations that want to get the publicity in front of that particular audience. So there are ways that a nonprofit can raise revenue. We're only using one of those ways, which is voluntary user contributions with the occasional large underwriter. Although the vast bulk of our revenues today are small individual donations. I think it's feasible that we may be able to develop other revenue streams, but there are requirements in nonprofit law about how much of your total budget can be commercial-ish activities. There's a cap on your total revenues that you could make that way. So in that respect, I think we are restricted in how much of a commercial-like enterprise we can become. And that's good. I think that's actually a good thing. But as my example for the theater shows, there's plenty of ways that within the bounds of both the copyright statute and the federal and state nonprofit laws, we could raise funds in other ways. We just, right now, I don't believe we have the need to do so. Our model is working. People are showing up and saying, yes, I would like to support you, and I don't like those interruptions every 15 minutes asking for money, so I'll make a contribution. Enough of those people are doing so that we're really paying the bills. By the way, the nonprofit that's most analogous is public broadcasting, public radio. I mean, they're a media operation. And from what we've been able to tell from publicly available data, our take rate, or the penetration rate of users who become donors, is very similar to public broadcasting. You know, they have those telethons or they have those fund drives. I give a little bit of money every month to my local NPR station where I live. There are enough people who do that NPR and PBS, along with their underwriters, are able to sustain operations. We have a very similar profile because the vast majority of our users don't contribute anything. But there is a big enough subset, as I said, that we have enough revenue. And I think as long as that model's working, you know what, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think it's working fine.
What if PBS or the CPB or whoever owns PBS, they don't really own it, right? It's the government.
It's an interesting relationship.
Can you merge? Can you be bought? Can you become part of their network or not?
It's a good question. I think as a matter of law, nonprofits can be acquired by other nonprofits. There's nothing that prevents that. I, for a long time, have thought that public broadcasters and Locast should work together. Because I'll give you an example. Our first market was New York City, and I reached out to the senior executives at the PBS affiliate in New York, WNET. And I explained to them what we were doing, and I said, by the way, you have children's programming on your multicast signal, but that doesn't show up on cable or satellite or any of the pay streaming services. We're going to carry it because we can. It's just a matter of having server capacity. And that way, if somebody's in their car and they want their kids to watch safe, educational, nonprofit, public broadcasting content, they can just, on their phone or their tablet or their laptop or what have you, they can stream it. You'll note that we didn't get a cease and desist letter from PBS, from WNET, from any public broadcast station. And in fact, some of our user comments have said explicitly, I'm thinking of somebody who lives in New England and couldn't get the WGBH public broadcasting signal from Boston. They wrote to us and said, I love Locast. I can finally get my public broadcast station that I can't get over the air. I don't get the signal, and I don't want to pay for cable. Bingo. There's Locast helping a public broadcaster extend the reach of their signal. That means that person is more likely to become a contributor to WGBH. It means that person benefits from the educational mission of WGBH. It means that person's children can watch child-friendly programming on WGBH. In fact, maybe even some of the multicast programming like we do in New York. So to me, there's a natural symbiosis between us and public broadcasting. I'd love to explore ways to make that even more comprehensive.
All these different platforms: Google Play, Android, Roku, Amazon. You already mentioned Dish, Apple TV. I mean, TiVo. So, how are you paying some kind of fee to them? Are they
No,
paying
it's a
to
great
you?
question. It's a great
Uh-huh.
question. They have different. They all have different policies for nonprofits. So whereas a typical commercial service would have to enter an agreement and give 30% of any revenues that they're generating, we're collecting charitable contributions into a nonprofit, so it's a different offering from those platforms. The important point, I think, to make clear on those about those platforms, we don't pick and choose winners and losers about which broadcast TV stations we carry. We just carry as many as we can. And we don't play favorites when it comes to platforms. We want to be on as many as we can. And both of those things underscore the mission of Locast, which is just to make it more available, local broadcasting, more available. The other thing I'll point out about all those platforms that are listed on our site is it was a monumental achievement of our technology team that they were able to integrate, negotiate, effectuate all of that app store stuff. That in and of itself is very valuable. I mean, if we were a for-profit company, someone would give us a valuation just based on the time it would take to
Do the integration.
as a startup. I mean, we've
Mhm.
made tremendous progress just by integrating our app into all those different platforms. And again, if you think about who's out there that needs our service, cord cutters, well, they're going to use Roku, they're going to use Amazon Fire Stick, maybe they use Apple TV. People who are lower income or price sensitive, they're going to use Android. The Android phones are much less expensive than the Apple phones. People who just love a beautiful, crisp picture on a computer screen as opposed to a typical television screen, maybe they're the ones who use Apple TV, although that's a fairly small universe. But you get the point. It's like no matter where you are on the OTT spectrum, there's something for you on those apps where we are. And by the way, I'll also point out TiVo and Android put us on set-top boxes where they are the operating system for those set-top boxes. And a lot of small cable and broadband providers these days, and even some mid-sized ones, are just looking to get out of the video business. It doesn't work for them economically. They're upside down. They're paying more on fees than they're making in revenues. And they view Locast as a great way for them to transition into just being the broadband pipe. And if you still want your local broadcast TV stations, here, open up Locast. Well, when TiVo or Android are on set-top boxes deployed by some of these cable operators, it makes it very easy for them just to say, hey, look, the app is there, go find it, you can watch your local broadcast TV stations. The limiting factor, of course, is there are 210 markets and we're only in 18. We got to be in more markets.
I don't remember if like Comcast is one of the groups suing you. I don't think so, right?
They are, because they own NBC.
They are?
And
Okay,
NBC,
I couldn't remember.
I mean, if you think about the big four broadcast networks, ABC, that's Disney, NBC, that's Comcast, CBS, that's now Viacom, CBS Viacom, and Fox, which is now the remnants of Fox that are still owned by the Murdoch family. A lot of it was sold to Disney.
Well, I don't want to dwell too long on the whole lawsuit because there's so much information if people want to find out about that on the web. But I'm also curious about whether or not you would embrace other forms of interactivity into the platform, or maybe you can't. Maybe you can't. I'm curious about, could you pick up signals from people who aren't big broadcast networks? What if they were, I mean, really low cast, right? These that people might maybe can you pick up stuff from online services like a live stream or something like that from a
Well,
YouTube or a, I
I've
mean,
made
I'm not sure that you can, so probably
I've made
not.
a decision, Tracy, to keep
Yeah.
this just about local broadcast stations. I've been approached by non-broadcast networks and programming services, and
Mm.
I've just said, for now, I just want to keep it simple. We want to be the place you go to when you want to watch programming, local programming. And by the way, in a city like Los Angeles, we have over 50 channels already on. So I don't really see the need to complicate that with non-broadcast programming, number one. And number two, you were sort of alluding to the smallest of the small broadcasters. Well, we carry a lot of them today. We carry a broadcaster, well, I can think of multiple markets where we carry broadcasters that are independent, meaning they are not affiliated with one of the big four networks, and in need of more distribution because people are cutting the cord, so their cable distribution is going down, and who have a desire to be online, and that's us. In terms of interactivity, we're very careful not to in any way alter or play with the programming stream that comes from the broadcaster. But it's conceivable, this has never happened, it's conceivable that a broadcaster could say to us, hey, we'll give you permission to do something different with our programming stream. And the example I always give is dynamic ad insertion. If a local broadcaster agreed, then Tracy would get a different 30-second spot than David, depending on our demographics and our tastes and whatnot. And the value of that ad spot would go up considerably. And to me, that is a new revenue opportunity for the broadcaster, let alone Locast, but it's really a new revenue opportunity for the broadcaster. And I think that's totally doable.
I just wonder, if when that's possible. Addressable is still, still being worked on. So we'll see if that happens. But back to the idea of interactivity and the idea of membership or something like that, where
that
people,
kind of interactivity, yes.
I mean, where people might be able to sign up, they might be able to chat, they could have watch parties, they could do, look at metadata. You could wrap a whole service kind of around the screen and never touch the actual content, but provide a kind of a window frame experience. But that's a whole layer of engineering that maybe you don't want to invest in right now, but I'm kind of curious because that's an opportunity for growth, right? And community building.
Yes. There's no doubt about it. That's a great opportunity. Now, I have to say again, because we're operating under a statute within the Copyright Act, I've been very loath to do linking or framing or other kinds of things on or around the screen other than our electronic programming guide. When you first start off on Locast, there's a programming grid and a preview window. And there is programming appearing in the preview window. Now that would be a place, that's real estate we own, so to speak. That would be a place where we could do some interactivity and some consumer interaction. But again, I think it would require, I haven't researched this, but I think it would require the permission of the broadcaster to do anything with their content other than what they're already putting out over the air. Now, I have been asked this question. I've been asked, what about DVR? Can you do DVR? And I think the answer to that is probably yes, because that is, if you're a cable company, you don't need additional permission from the broadcaster to offer DVR functionality to the user. And so it makes kind of intuitive sense that if we're operating under a different statute, the same concept would apply. I just have been loath to complicate the consumer offering. I want to just make it simple. It's just a translator service. We're a digital translator service. We're not trying to add non-broadcast channels. We're not trying to add DVR functionality, but certainly it's conceivable that either of those, if courts agree, that would be certainly a direction we could go. It's just not something that I anticipate doing.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. I think we've gone way beyond our normal time, but that's because the conversation is very interesting. So I hope people will watch this entire piece. I really enjoyed talking with you, David.
You too, Tracy. I really appreciate you. You've always been so generous at your conferences by inviting me to come and participate and by making Locast part of the conversation. It's been wonderful to be there with you, and I look forward to the day when this crisis is over. We can all get together again and do some of those panels in person.
Well, actually, we're going to be announcing a virtual event.
Oh, well, do include us, Tracy.
Okay, well, too bad we can't broadcast it over Locast. Okay.
I'll tell you what, wait a minute. Here's what we could do. We could find a small, independent, local broadcaster in markets like San Francisco, LA, Chicago, New York, and elsewhere that would be willing to put your conference on one of their multicast streams for a little while, and it will appear on Locast. Okay?
That'd be cool. From your lips to God's ears, God's matzah. All right, thank you so much, David. I really appreciate it. Everybody keep a lookout for locast.org. Track David's developments because he's a maverick. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you,
David. This is Tracy Swedlow from Televisionation. Take care, everybody.